All right, so I'm live. Apparently, everything works. So last night's Foundations of Faith was a bust because I was driving down the highway. We were discussing an age of anxiety and a couple of various different points that I felt all kind of tied together. We'll see if I can recreate it here today for those members of the Patreon that are contributing to my success. Find something they like, and I appreciate that. Thank you very much. We live in an age of anxiety. We live in an age when the primary product that is being promoted is the anxiety to be appreciated, be liked. If you are surfing some kind of social media and you don't understand what the product is, that means that you are the product. And there are algorithms that are carefully designed to anticipate your behavior. Everybody said, well, they must be listening in. How are they? No, they've got very powerful, complicated, professional, well-designed algorithms that determine everything you see. So we live in an age when so much shit is in chaos. We've been overloaded with information, and it's quite obvious we can't handle it. We can't even elect a president. So based on that, how are we, as people that follow Asatru, standing on the edge of society, going to look into it and make a healthy decision as to what we might engage in and what we're not going to engage in? That's the real question. Because there's a lot of things that I can do with this spirituality. I can sit around and find all kinds of rabbit holes and conspiracies to bitch about, complain about, and consider that, well, that's good enough. I understand something. Well, that's not why I got into this. That's not why a lot of people got into this. And if the best that we can come up with for people that show up here is, well, you need to be frustrated about this, and you need to be frustrated about that. You really need to understand some of these things about World War II that shut the fuck up. Take that shit somewhere else. I didn't come here to get frustrated by some nonsense. So how do I find it? How do I sort through the wheat from the chaff? How do I, just like King Gilfy, how do I enter these great halls and not be distracted by the man juggling San Fernand laces or the great gilded ceiling or this nonsense over here or that nonsense over there in an age of anxiety, when the greatest commodity is the ability to create angst within a person to the degree that they will get up, stand up, raise hell, get ostracized, run off, made fun of, and then I'm going to call myself Asatru like it means something. How are we going to do that? Well, there's a couple of ways to do it. And one of the funniest things to do is we play. Now, how does play turn into the idea of creating something sacred and holy? Let's say you're playing dodgeball. Before the game, you look at that pink rubber ball that's going to smash you in the face, and it's really just a ball. But in the middle of that game, you're doing everything you can. You've attributed all kinds of special things, abilities, ideas to that ball that's hurtling in your direction. True fear emanates from your very being as this ball heads in your way. And if it happens to smash you in the face and everybody laughs, it's even all the more worse. In that moment, when you're attributing all of these wonderful, radical ideas of terror and danger to the ball, is the same moment that we determine what becomes sacred and holy in our lives. It's the same mental process. It's the same thing that happens. So how do we create that mindset when we look at the world that we live in? When do we come to grips with the idea that everything that we're looking at out there is something very special, powerful, and holy? Is that's when we begin to build a faith that helps us rise above the chaos and morass that's continually threatening to suck us down, chew us up, spit us out as the byproduct of a heavily influenced society of news and culture and commentary and bullshit and everybody else's ideas. And, oh, he's really right about that. And if I'm right about that, I'll be more right than you. That's not going to get you anywhere. Get you an ulcer. Make your hair go gray. Right? See? So, when we gather around a circle, around a fire, and we're raising a horn and we're putting all this together, and we're all of the same mindset, we are in that moment indulging in the same kind of thought process as a child at play. How many times have you heard from the mouth of babes? It's the same thing. The very foundational blocks, the bricks with which we build the foundations of faith, can sometimes be found in the questions that a 5-year-old might ask. Why is the sky blue? Where do babies come from? Those kinds of thoughts and ideas, when they begin to cement in our mind, are what we create this foundation of faith, and we make this connection. We attribute all kinds of special ideas and commonalities, and we begin to feel something very different about a horn that somebody carved and made beautiful that's from an animal, with full of mead that somebody may have brewed or somebody bought at the store. And all of a sudden, as we partake of that, something very special begins to happen that changes our thought process and changes our perception of the world. Now, this is not something new. And the thought that really got me thinking about it was the discovery that yesterday I heard a story about an archaeologist at the turn of the last century who found 3 caves somewhere in Switzerland. One at 8,000 feet and 2 at 7,000 feet. And inside this cave, they had these well-shaped little alcoves, and they had the skull of cave bears in there. Some of them had circles on top of the skull, and they had bones sticking out of the eyes, and some were propped up with bones. They were arranged in a ceremonial fashion. Now, the thing about that is, to get to those caves, you have to go to a time period that was before the last glaciation. And you have to understand that the cave bear went extinct in Europe 30,000 years ago. So we're talking about something that's very, very ancient by people that aren't really supposed to know these kinds of things. They're not supposed to understand that. And yet, when we look at that, there begins to become this connection that somewhere along the way, people began to yearn for something greater, a connection that meant something more than just something what they read or how more right they were than the next guy. Something that allowed them to pick up a pointed stick and go hunt down a fucking woolly mammoth or a cave bear. The end of the last glaciation period in Europe, when they could reach those caves, was 75,000 years ago, between 200,000 and 75,000 years ago. So we may not even be talking about people. We might be talking about Neanderthals. Now, maybe we can dismiss that, and maybe we can't. Because on the western edge of Asia today, there's a tribe of what they call Indians who are surrounded by Mongols who are blue-eyed, wavy-haired, and fair-skinned. And in their ceremonies, they consider fire to be the goddess from the mountain, the volcanic fire goddess. Keeps the hearth warm, very important connection there. And they also have a bear god. So when one of their gods comes to visit the world, they take the form of an animal or a tree. Their whole world is divine. And within their connection to the world, they find an aspect of their own divinity. And the Hindus say, there's one sect of the Hindus, the Bagram, I can't pronounce the name, we'll try. Only the divine can worship divinity. And I'll get back to that. So when a hunter goes out in the woods and he kills a bear, he comes down to the village and he says, a god is coming to visit the village. And a bunch of warriors go out there and they carry the bear with great ceremony, pomp, and circumstance, and they cut a huge, what they call a god window in the back of the hut of the individual that killed the bear. And they let the bear lay there overnight with its face facing the fire so the bear god and the fire goddess can commune. And they can talk to each other in this realm. And there's great feasting and ceremony. And then they butcher the bear and they cut the skin off the feet and the head, and they treat that with certain ceremonial pomp and circumstance, because in their mind they have given this god the freedom to go back to the realm from which he came. They have made this sacrifice in his behalf, because in their mind, when a god comes to visit the world in animal form, they're trapped there until somebody sets them free, till they die. So these people believe they're doing a great service to the bear god, this great god from the mountain. by sacrificing the bear and freeing him. And with great ceremony, pomp and stance, and feasting and drinking and celebration that might last many days, they free that bear god and they send it back saying, hey, please remember us. Remember the kindness that we bestowed in setting you free, and tell the others that they too would be welcomed here in the same fashion, that we will free them. We will make sacrifice. We will do celebration. And they give it a stick. Same way they give their dead a stick. So when one of their own dies, they give it a stick and say, take this stick and raise it and lower it as you raise and lower your feet. And do not look to the left or to the right. Do not be distracted. Walk straightway to your ancestors. Forget about us. We're fine. Go and talk to the ancestors, because if you go there and worry about us, they're going to make fun of you because you're not appreciating where you are. Now that culture, as the bear is consumed, as they are feasted upon, they take the bear skull and they grind down to the rear molar, like the bear in Switzerland, and they paint circles on its head, like the bear in Switzerland, and they leave 2 vertebrae attached to the back of the skull, like the bear in Switzerland, and they put it on top of a sending away stick. So in an unbroken line that might be 100,000 years old or older, these traditions have continued, and they are surrounded by, we call feasting and celebration. What I want you to remember is that this is not a solemn occasion. There's much happiness and joy in these undertakings, these sacrifices, these offerings, this impregnation of faith. There's a great deal of joy, happiness, play, laughter. There are good feelings that are involved with the spirituality of these people who are completely incorporated into the environment in which they live. I say it all the time. They're a part of the world they live in. They're just like the tree or the antelope or the grass does not suffer anxiety. It simply lives, it eats, it escapes the hunter, it survives, it reproduces, it thrives. And we still see those wild animals on the plains and in private and on films. We see the young ones at play, enjoying life. This is the brass tacks of everything we need to be doing. Are you enjoying life? Or does it continue to be a struggle? Do you feed off of the righteous indignation you find because you're right about this and more right about that? Or are you happy in this world? Is this what we have to get down to? And sometimes it means setting it down and enjoying who you're with and play a little bit. Those people that find themselves a part of the world in which they live in and celebrate their gods with joyous and happy occasions, they're touching the divinity within themselves so they might worship the divine. And here in our own spirituality, we have that same tool. And it's in the third et of the Elder Futhark. That's how important it is. That third et is full of the most beautiful concepts and ideas about personal growth and development and what we might become that I have ever come across. And Inguz is a part of that. That seed of the divine from Rig, from Odin, Vili, and Vea, from Gefjon, from how many other places we don't know. But that divine seed within us, the God seed, the willingness to become more. You find aspects of it in Manaz. You find aspects of it in Languz. You find aspects of it in Tiwaz and Burkano, Othala and Dagaz. All of those runes represent a higher aspect of being, a higher aspect of thought, a higher aspect of a lot of things. And when you use that great participle ing, ing, and you are playing, being, living, thriving, life begins to change. Life begins to become something much, much more than we ever anticipated. This is the rudiments of faith. This is where the divine within us begins to connect with the divinity we so hold holy and want to connect with. This is where our lives begin to change and become something grand. So we find ourselves seeking that and still surrounded by this age of anxiety. I assure you, when you seek that with your heart and you begin to incorporate it into your life, You can look into this world that so many of us have left and look back at with disdain and much distaste. And there's much wailing and gnashing of teeth at these dumb shits. And we're all separated from it. How much of it do we feel like getting involved in? The great thing about that is all of a sudden we begin to realize I have a choice. I didn't always have a choice. I had no choice but to barrel headlong into there, swinging both fists, kicking, biting, screaming, hollering, raising hell, giving it 110% so you would understand that I am right. Whether I was or not is irrelevant. It was the effort. So we don't need somebody to seek the divine for us. It's a part of who we are. That's a wonderful kind of promise and idea that so many people will never grasp, will never understand. From there, you can go anywhere. From there, you might become anything. It's interesting that anything ends in ing. That participle is there as well. So we have a choice once we begin to understand what the part we play in this world as to how much we want to get involved, how much we feel like being affected. And from there, we can grow. Take the gamble. Spend a little time playing and see if you don't find yourself a little bit happier. It ain't all got to be all so serious. It ain't all got to be so deep, dark, esoteric, and mysterious. At some point, we got to step into the light and throw a ball with our kids. You're probably going to find more happiness in that than just about anything you want. And if you're doing like what most people are doing, you're going to spend some time with your child in the sun, throwing a ball or playing, and you're going to come back in here, and for a split second, there's going to be that shadow of a doubt when you get online to look at what's going on in the world. I don't really like this anymore. Find the divine within you by playing and celebrate life. It's that simple. Have a good day. Today's Monday. Grab it by the nose and whip its ass and spend a little time playing.